Okay, let's talk for a minute about who gets authorship on a paper. This is going to be something that you're going to be wrestling with as you go through graduate school or as you get into the workforce and you start publishing papers. There is a bit of contention when it comes to who actually gets authorship. So I'm going to use some of my own papers as examples for this and what all the general authorship means. Now, you're likely most used to seeing the main author's name come first, and that is usually true. So there's a little bit of information, shall we say, that you can glean from the order of authorship on any given paper. Usually the first author, so in this case, Adrian Brundage, that is the person that did all the work and wrote the paper. The first author is the one that put the bulk of the work into that research. So whoever did that, whoever did the most work, whoever collected all the data, things like that, did all of the work, really, it gets first author. That first authorship area is coveted, and that is primarily because of the way that references work. And especially when you think about the references, the way that we use them in InStars, you use the last name of the first author, right? So that means that when people reference your paper, it's your name that gets out there. That's a little bit of immortality in the science world. So that first authorship is where everybody wants to be. In fact, if you get first authorship on a paper, that paper ranks a little bit higher or has a little bit more weight on your resume or on your CV to your future prospects than if you were middle or last author. So that's why people tend to fight for it. So here's an example of references the way that we're used to seeing them. You know, if it's a single person or several people, you have that et al, and then there's that last name. If it's two people, it's both of them. So you get your name said a bunch of times. So first author is the one who did all the work. Now, the next most important authorship is usually the last author. So this last author indicates that this is the person who helped fund that research or whose lab you worked in. So basically, this is a spot of honor. It is a spot saying, I worked with this professor or this researcher. They had their lab all set up. They helped me. They walked me through things. Maybe they didn't even add anything to the paper or data, but I used all of their equipment that they'd already had, or I was able to use land that they owned, or something of that nature. So this indicates money, basically. So in this case, here's my name. This was my professor that I worked with right there. So he got last authorship because I worked in his lab. Now, then the authors in the middle, these tend to be reserved for people who helped out in some limited way. They didn't do as much as the first author. Maybe they helped do some data collection, or they helped read over the papers substantially, or something of that nature. So in this case, this is Dr. Shannon Brose. So she was another one of my professors. She was helping me out with just the statistical analysis here. These middle authorships is where you, as the first author, gets to decide who gets in that area. And these tend to go from most important to least important, or most work put in to least work put in. So if you look at some of these other papers, so here's one where I'm a middle author. Okay, so in this case, this primary author, Rodrigo here, he did all this work. He worked in Jeff Tomberlin's lab. I am on here simply because I had figured out how to do some of these methods before he did them. So he used a lot of my methods in my work. So I really didn't put much at all into this particular paper, but I did put a lot into all the pre-work that went into it. Samoa was Rodrigo's professor from his home university, so she did a lot of the data analysis with him and a lot of the reading over the paper. So you can see I'm the least important author there, but I still got authorship because of my contribution to the materials and methods. So what you want to do as the first author is to decide who actually contributed in some way and did that way meet a minimum amount of work in order to get authorship. There are some professors that insist, or some researchers that insist, you have to do data collection in order to be an author. Other people insist that if you contributed in whatever way, you can be an author. I fall into that second camp simply because it doesn't cost me anything to add people as authors to my paper, especially when we're talking about sort of in the middle here. And when you add somebody as an author, they get something a little bit out of it, and they're much less likely to bitch at you. So there have been lawsuits levied against researchers if you don't give proper authorship. And on really important papers, say, in like really big issues, you'll see papers with a whole bunch of authors, because a really high level journal with a paper with your name on it, that goes a long way, even if you're sort of buried in the middle there. So that's kind of what you're seeing here on one of my papers. This was a huge, hairy paper. I spent 2 years on this data collection, analysis, and everything like that. It was just me, nearly 24 hours a day for 2 years, running all these things and crying and pulling my hair out and whatever. So I have first authorship. You can see that it was in Dr. Tomberlin's lab, so he has last authorship. All these other people in here, Tawny Crippen, she was another professor on my committee. She did a little bit of help, or she helped me surface sterilize some of the eggs. Banishwar, he was a postdoc that was in the lab at the time, and he reviewed some of my work and sat down with me and helped me figure out some of the methods when I was running into problems. So he got that next authorship. Dr. Benbow helped review my statistics in this paper and see if they were correct. So he didn't actually collect any data. He didn't even give me the statistical idea. He just reviewed it to make sure it was okay. But that was considered enough to get him authorship. When she helped me clean up on a regular basis. So she even got authorship. Dr. Tyrone and Dr. Wood here are both people who read through the paper and helped reorganize it, so they also got authorship. But because this is in the Annals of the Entomological Society of America, that's a pretty big journal. We ended up putting a lot more people on this paper than we would have otherwise. So something like this, it's in a much less well-known journal, Forensic Science International. There's only 3 authors on here. There were more people that read the paper. There were more people that were in the lab when this paper was being done, but because it's not that big a deal, nobody really cared. We just put these 3 people. And so it's really up to you who gets authorship on your paper. I always say err on the side of caution, and if somebody helped you in a substantial way, and you'll have to define what substantial means for yourself. For me, it means, did you help out, and are you kind of angling for it? Did you do something other than just proofread? Is really my bar. If somebody helped me reorganize substantially, or worked on the stats with me, or worked in the lab with me, they'll get authorship on that paper, because it doesn't cost me a single thing to give somebody this middle authorship. I get the first authorship if I've done most of the work. My advisor or the professor whose lab it is gets the last authorship there, and then everybody else can be just sort of thrown in the middle. They get credit for it. That really helps them out. And honestly, you're helping them out now, and they could come back and help you out in the future, and you can end up getting authorship pretty easily. And that's what happened with this one. Because I just happened to be there, and I had helped him out quite a bit, he just gave me authorship basically as a thank you on this paper. So that was really, really nice, and I'm much more likely to help him again in the future. It's basically currency in the scientific world, authorship. So keep that in mind. Now you'll find in some of the big journals like Nature, here, Nature and Science and those really huge journals, they have really high impact factors, and getting an authorship on a Nature paper or a science paper like that can be huge in your career. So you'll find that even the most basic papers, like review papers like this, will have 8 or 10 authors. That's because They're following those same rules. This first author is the one who did all the work. This last author is the one who all paid for it. Everybody in the middle had something to do, but it's also a tit for tat. It's, I'm going to give you authorship on this paper, and I expect you to help me out in the future. So keep that in mind. I would say err on the side of caution. Give authorship liberally, because it will just fix a lot of hassle in the future. Now, if you are doing your own research and you are not sure who should get authorship, unless you did something absolutely on your own, you didn't work with a professor at all, you didn't call them up and talk to them about it, or meet with them on a regular basis, or work in their lab, then you can have your own sole authorship. If you worked in somebody's lab, if you had a professor that was mentoring you, they need to get that last area, that last authorship shout out. And then add in people in the middle that helped you out in some substantial way. And there you're good to go. All right, let me know if you have any questions.